I'm Tedder.
I'm Weber.
And we're Tedder and Weber. Welcome to episode 7. 7's my favorite number.
Oh.
Why? Why is that? Oh. 3 is your favorite number?
Actually 13, but if you're going between 0 and 10, it's 3.
No, mine's 7. You want to know why?
Why?
Fun fact. I got married on 7/7/07.
Nuh-uh.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was not scripted. She really didn't know
I really didn't know that. I had no clue.
Yes.
Very cool.
We did. We got married on July 7/07.
That's crazy.
I know.
Okay.
So it was really cute because, like, I was the one planning, like, everything because, like, I've been planning since I was, like, wearing a pillowcase as a veil when I was, like, 6. Or however old I was. Like, since Cinderella was a thing, I guess. But that's, like, the 1950s, and I'm not that old. But nonetheless, I'm old, but I'm not that old. And older. So we had it all planned. I didn't even think about it. Like, we literally, like, booked our venue for some date in June. And my now husband calls me, and he's like, babe, 7/7/7's a Saturday. And I was like, okay, like, that's super cool. And he's like, we've got to get married on that day. And I'm like, babe, we've already put a deposit down on the place. And he's like, you gotta call him. So I called him, and it was available. I don't know how, but we did.
That's crazy.
We got married on 7/7/7.
And Todd's so quiet.
He is. Well,
I'm just trying to picture him.
He is, actually.
Babe, we gotta get big.
He was so jazzed. I was like, I mean, if he's that into it, like, I gotta do it. But what I didn't realize is it just set him up for, like, the easiest remembering of dates in the whole world.
Do you think that had something to do with it?
Probably not, because he's actually, like, a super romantic guy. But he, like, my birthday's Valentine's Day, and so
I did
like,
know that.
That's super easy to remember. And then 7/7/7, I'm like, it's also one number to remember.
Right.
He's got it. You got it easy, baby.
Good call, Todd.
Anyway, that's a big tangent, a 2-minute tangent to say, hello, welcome to episode 7.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
we like to give you fun facts about ourselves in the mix here. So
I don't have any fun facts. I don't think
you got lots. Episode 7. So last week we talked about what happens. Like we summarized those 3 types of comparison and what happens.
How they affect us.
How they separate us. And so the whole goal of the topic of comparison is to show that comparison, like coveting, separates us from God and others.
Yeah.
And so now we've put in the work for 1, we know that we're comparing, and 2, we know what kind of comparison, and 3, we know what happens when we're in that kind of comparison.
Yep.
So now we want to talk about
how do we reconnect?
Oh, now that you asked,
oh my
gosh. I happen to have some notes prepared. Just kidding.
By the way, if you missed the episodes before, you're on the channel, so just take a look. Follow us on socials. Check out our pages.
She's so good at this. I never do that.
Because my ADHD's like, hello.
Don't forget. Yeah. So we want to talk about how do we get reconnected. Yeah. So, like, what happens when we're disconnected and how we get reconnected. Yeah. So let's open it up and first talk about what happens, when we've done all these comparative narratives in our brain and, now we're pretty disconnected. I know that we have shared how we became disconnected from comparison, and we've shared how we've kind of reconnected, obviously, since we've written, like, an entire thing today. Right. And now we have a show. Yeah. But for you, like, in your life, like, what happens when you're disconnected? We kind of want to just give you some real life examples and go through that, like, reconnection process that we actually refer to as resurrendering. And so we will get there soon. But I know for me, when I am disconnected, I do this thing. I do it a lot during the day, like when my day is crazy, because I have a lot going on at home, which I can't share all of it, but I have someday I'll be able to share something. But right now in this season, it's kind of a silent season for me, and so I struggle, and I know that there are times where I find myself really just I do, it kind of scares me, honestly. I do this weird stare where I'm just like, and it's all like chaos around me. And I just stare into it. Like I'm not looking at anything. Like the house could be burning down and I'm just staring. And I'm in this really, really trapped comparative mindset where I'm like, how do I get through this? How has anyone gotten through this? But lots of people have. And I get super, super lost in that thought process.
Personally, I like to make a catalog of all of my faults and all of my poor decisions over my life.
I don't do that.
And compare them to what others, or what I think.
That's what you think. Yeah,
what I think others have done. And
that's a good point.
It creates a cycle in my head where I'm just like, oh, and I replay things that have long since gone away. Like, who cares what I did in second grade, or who cares that I showed my underoos in kindergarten because I didn't know any better. Yeah, true story, it happened. But you know, you sit there and you replay everything and you're like, well, nobody else has ever done this. Yeah. And I guarantee you they have.
Yeah.
We are here, we are flawed, and nobody is perfect.
Yeah. I think when, you know, the biggest hardship that you'll face when trapped in that comparative narrative is that isolation that we talked about especially with the self-comparisons. But it's that isolation, and that's really the danger zone.
Yeah, because when you're left with only your voice, repeating things that others have spoken over you, or things that you've thought about yourself.
I mean, even things that you assume people have thought about you.
That's a really good point, because you may be, if I'm staring at you like this, I am probably just trying to remember what it was I came into the room for. Just being totally transparent.
So that happened to me. So I always used to say I can't control my face, which was true for quite a while. The facial expressions bested me every time. And now I've learned to just kind of do the blank stare so that I don't make a facial expression that's unintended. It's not easy.
Teach me a lesson.
It's not easy. But like literally, like I had a teacher in high school pull me aside after class and go, Lindsay, you have to stop that. And I'm like a super good student. And I was like, what? Stop what? And I was a good student. I was honest. I was a very honest student. And she's like, every time I wanted to be an English major back in the day. I thought I was gonna be like a high school English teacher.
Me too.
No way.
I thought I was gonna be a college professor.
No way. That's hysterical. Here we are. So of course my love of words makes sense, but like at the time I was like, I had gone to a private school and had this horrible situation and switched to public school my junior year, and because I had a really good educational background, I was in a lot of advanced classes at the public school, and I still felt like I wanted more English classes. So I doubled up. I took like AP English and Brit Lit. And Brit Lit was like where you went if you didn't do regular English. I didn't know that. I just thought, I'm like, Shakespeare, that's great. And so I was with a lot of students who maybe English wasn't like their like strong suit. So I guess I made a bunch of facial expressions in the back of the class every time someone answered incorrectly. And so I didn't know that that's what I was doing, obviously. But the teacher, she was really funny. She was like my favorite teacher, one of them. She said, Lindsay, you have to stop this. And I'm like, what am I doing? She's like, you sit in the back of the class and every time someone answers a question and it's such a bad answer, she's like, your face says everything my brain is thinking, and I'm a teacher. I'm not supposed to think this way. And I was like, I don't understand. So then the next day or whatever, the next class, I caught myself doing it, and I was like, oh yeah, she's not wrong. She's definitely not wrong. And so that's how I learned that. And there was this weird time in the mall where this lady gave me like this horrible look, and I was like, what's up with that woman? And my friend was like, it was probably in response to your face because you look nasty. But I wasn't looking at her, and I wasn't thinking anything about her. It was me working through stuff in my own brain. Like, how do I do that? Like, whatever I was thinking about. And when you make that scowl or internal dialogue and someone sees it, it translates to them as like, oh, they're talking about me, they're judging me. Yeah. And so there's a lot of assumption when it comes to comparison. And so I have a phrase that I repeat to myself often, that it's, I take them at face value. So unless someone like blatantly disrespects me, blatantly says something nasty to me, I take them at face value. There's a lot of people in my lives that like I've had to create some pretty healthy boundaries, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, because they invaded my personal space in a negative way. Like they made me have negative thought processes. Yes. And so I just created this mantra of like, hey, I just take them at face value. If they don't say it to me, then I don't know about it. And so that's how I've had to get through kind of some of those disconnected spaces.
I tell my kids and I tell my team, assume positive intent.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's looking at you and they're zoned out, they have no idea what facial, you know, characteristics they're displaying at that moment.
Not at all.
But when you take it and you internalize it, which is what you do when you're isolated, you don't have anybody there to kind of say, hey, come back to reality. They're not really doing this. And it starts that loop inside of your head. And the enemy is a crafty little weasel. You know, he knows what buttons to push. He's not omniscient and he's not omnipotent.
But we give him enough information.
Right. He can read our tells. Yeah. And he can, and you know, and he can hear and that stuff. So he knows what buttons to push. And when we are isolated, that opens the door for him. And he just comes Kool-Aiding in and he's just like, hey, you know, look at that person. That person's doing this. And it, like for me personally, it starts a really bad narrative inside of my brain. Like I just look at things and from a totally different perspective, and I'm not looking at it from the eyes of a child of God. I'm looking at it from somebody who's condemning themselves, and I'm so far removed from what he wants me to do.
Right.
That it takes a while to get back. Yeah. It really does.
Well, and I think it's not only a matter of the time that it would take you to get back.
It's the effort, too.
It's an effort. It's a conscious choice. You have to know.
You have to be able to recognize it.
Correct. And that's, I think, why we're so passionate about this topic is because when you are trapped in a comparative narrative, you don't realize it. I know for me, like, how do I say this? I'm a very control freak type of person, or I used to be pre-kids. So like I felt it was my responsibility to like take charge, reclaim these lost places of my life, or my perceived lost places of my life. And what I really came to realize is that reclaiming that I want to do, like I'm like, oh, I want to. And when I say reclaim, let me specify. I like, for example, like whatever. I mean, insert any topic. Like, oh, you've really let your house slack off, or you haven't been to the gym, or you've been eating bad. Like you haven't been going to church all the time. Like whatever it is that you've kind of like slacked off on, right? You want to get better at or whatever. You know, for me, I'm always like this take charge. Like I'm a fix it. Like I'm a helper. I'm a fixer. This. I got this. I don't need your help, bro. I am capable. Which then gets me in a whole mess because that's
a whole different
episode. But I get in this mentality of this reclaiming. Yeah. Excuse me. I'm trying not to be sick. I'm not actually that sick, but I just like every once in a while have a little.
Do I need to spray you with Lysol?
Nah, you fine.
Okay.
You fine. Okay. So I just think that I get in this like reclamation kind of mindset where I'm like, I will reclaim this. I will bring it back to its original glory. I will start doing these things again. And I create this super unrealistic expectation for my own life. It's like never going to the gym for years and years and years and years, and then all of a sudden be like, I'm going 5 days a week, I'm going to go for an hour straight, I'm going to do 30 minutes of cardio, and I'm going to take this other class, I'm going to do these weights, whatever it may be. It's unrealistic. You can't do that emotionally, and you can't do it physically.
No.
And so what I realized through this writing process is it's not reclaiming that we need to do, it's resurrendering. So once you kind of identify, hey, I have struggled with comparison, this is the type of comparison, I recognize that I'm disconnected. Now what? Your attempt is to reclaim that space of your life.
It's not for us to do.
It's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to go like this to God and say, hey, this is where I'm struggling. It's on you now.
Take the wheel.
It's on you now.
Yeah.
And so I think for this the benefit of this process, this word resurrender, it's really not like a real like Oxford Dictionary situation.
But it's a real word.
But it's definitely a real
It's in the book.
It's a word because Tedder and Weber said so.
Yeah.
Tedder and Weber. You said the Tedder and Weber.
It's been a long time.
That's going to be a blooper faux show. So anyway, I think, that reclamation mentality that we get, if we can recognize that like, hey, we don't need to reclaim our lives, we need to resurrender our lives. And it's like you say it best, like it's not a one and done.
It's not one and done. And I think, when you look at how the world operates, it's all about, take your power, do this.
Yeah.
You have, and that's great to an extent. However, we're not in charge of our life, of the plan of our life, of any of that. We are here. We were put here by the one who created us for a purpose.
Right.
And I think, when you start talking about, how does the world look at things, and you need to do this and you need to do this and take charge and do that, that's beaten into our heads
it is.
From the time that we can hear, you know, and that's not the right approach, because it is, again, not up to us.
Right. Like I think of it this way, like we are responsible for our actions.
Correct.
But we're not responsible for God's call in our life.
And we're not responsible for other people either.
No, we're not. And we'll get there. We will get to this boundaries conversation.
Yeah.
I think boundaries is actually going to be episode 8 at this point.
At this point, I think so.
Because we were going to try to pack it into this episode, but God gave us a little more content than we expected. Which is what He does.
He does that. Isn't His
name. So good. We have to tell you, we started this episode very hesitantly.
We were like, do we have enough?
Let's add this together and make it one episode.
Yeah, no.
And it's not.
It's
fine.
not. It's not.
So that'll be for episode
8.
But it's this resurrendering. I know, when I was like, we kind of talked about this, but it's mentioned in the study a little bit, and I'll summarize because it's too long of a story for just to not be an entire episode. I mentioned briefly that I had suffered quite an event at my private school, and it's kind of a long story, but I mentioned it in the past on these episodes, and in that situation, I was desolate. I mean, I wasn't just isolated. I was completely desolate. I was a wasteland, so to speak. And I remember I prayed for rapture. I did. It was definitely before, like the topics of self-harm, were so widely discussed.
Right.
And I didn't in fact want to hurt myself as a form of escape. I really just felt
Jesus
like
to come back and take you.
I really just felt like the world had suffered long enough, and I was
time.
like, God,
Hey, God,
I know there's nothing left
TikTok.
for me, so let's do this. And here we are 20 some years later. And I'm super glad that we didn't have rapture.
Right.
But that being said, when I was in that super, super isolated experience, that's probably the most isolated I've ever been. It was very easy for me to believe lies, to believe that everyone was out to get me.
Yep.
You know, I told you I started the year very popular and ended it with like 2 people talking to me. And it's funny because like I'm super, super good friends with someone that I actually knew like from my school in that time period. And she wasn't one of the 2 that would talk to me. And it's not that, and you know who you are, and I'm sure you're watching this. But like, it wasn't that it wasn't that she treated me poorly or she mistreated me in any way. She had her own life that she was living. Right. She was already with her now husband, and she was occupied. And realistically, that's kind of what Steph and I were talking about, is like that assumption of the ill intent, the assumption that everyone's out to get me, or that they're looking at me in a certain way and they're seeing this. You guys, I still deal with this sometimes. I'll literally be driving in my car and be like, oh my gosh, like this person, I can't like get a little boogie because someone's looking at me. And then I'm like, well, I also should have been picking my nose in my car. But I have a nose ring, and so like sometimes you have to kind of like, readjust it. And I picture that Seinfeld episode where I'm like, I'm fixing it this way and the person over here is looking at me, and then I get this whole sort of like mental like mess where I'm like, oh my gosh, you're gonna think I'm picking my nose. And it's like, the reality is like most people pick their nose. I'm so sorry. Like, I wash my hands. Don't like think I'm disgusting. And I really wish I hadn't taken this turn on this episode.
I don't know where
However, Steph's like, land your plane, Lindsay. I think that you allow those voices to dictate your behavior.
Yeah.
So when you're isolated, when you're disconnected, it's so easy. Like Steph said, you don't have anyone building you up, breathing life into you whatsoever, that you believe.
Calling you on your crap and
Correct.
Saying, where's this coming from?
Right. But how
when
often
was the
are
last
we
time you
truthful?
opened your Bible?
Yeah.
Ooh.
There it is.
Yeah.
That'll preach.
Yeah.
How often, but seriously, like, how often do we even let someone in, even now, to say, like, this is how bad I'm struggling?
Well, think about it. If you're having a crappy day and you're, like, at the bottom of the barrel,
you don't
and your energy's gone, and you're just like, I don't know where to go, how to turn this around, or, what to do. And somebody texts you and says, hey, how you doing? Yeah. What are you going to say?
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm fine. Things are great.
And those are surface friendships.
Correct. Yes. But I think that the key difference is, if they're a surface friendship, the chance of them being the one to speak life over you is probably, I don't want to say non-existent, because it could happen.
Yeah, you can get life from anyone.
But typically, I know in my situation, the people that speak life into me are the people that know me the best, and they can read me like a book.
Yeah.
You know when I'm struggling. Yeah. You're like, nah,
No, I don't believe that fake sound and text, bro.
Yeah.
What's like, really up?
Yeah. Are you really okay? And I have a few friends that do that, and they speak life over me. And I've come to realize that when I isolate myself, I can't depend on other people to say, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. Right. I have to turn around and say, I need to open my Bible. I need to pray. I need to surrender whatever's going on in my noggin. That's
re-surrender.
Re-surrender it over and over and over. Yeah. Because otherwise, I'm not going to get out of that pit, because it's not anybody else's responsibility. It's my responsibility to be accountable to God.
Correct. And I think that you just nailed it. We have a choice. Yes. Right? God's given us free will.
Yes.
We can choose. Sure I know, right? Like, it's tough. But like we get to choose. Yes. We can stay disconnected. Yeah. We can stay wrought with sin of comparison, isolated and alone, or we can re-surrender our emotions and our thoughts and everything else really to God, and He will put us in touch with the people who we need and who need us. Absolutely. This one time I had one of my...
Sorry, I have to move my chair.
You're good. Okay. One of my kids was like very, very, very sick, was puking, and it's just, it was this like crazy experience. Like, it's just really tough day. And I missed a phone call from a friend, and she doesn't usually call. She's more of like a text friend. Not that we don't talk on the phone, but like, you know, my life is nuts, and so most people just text, "Hey, are you available?" if they want to talk to me. And so it's true. I'm sorry, it's true.
Same.
And so
if it's textable, then I'm all in.
Yeah, you're right. But sometimes you also need to hear someone's voice to know how they're really doing, because I can throw in some exclamation points in my text, and you'd be like, "Oh, she cool." Mm. But when I don't have one, you'd be like, "Girl, what's wrong?" So I got this phone call. I didn't even see it. I don't know where my phone was half the day, because I was literally either cleaning up vomit or like having a sick kid lay on me. It was just this crazy, awful experience. And so later, there's
one of God's creatures died bombing my phone.
Later, I saw it and I texted her and I was like, "Hey, did I miss a call from you? Like, what's up? Are you okay?" And she said the sweetest thing. She was like, "I don't know. You were just on my heart. I felt like I needed to check in on you. Are you doing okay?" And I was like, "No." No, it's been a terrible day, and this is what's been going on, and wow, like, thank you, one, for listening to God, and two, for letting me know that I'm not alone. But I say that to say she wouldn't have done that
if she hadn't gotten a nudge.
No.
Okay.
Also that, but that's not what I was going to say. You're right.
I'm wrong.
You're right. I was going to say she wouldn't have done that if she was stuck in the mindset of comparison.
Correct. That is true.
If she was worried about her own self.
What's she going to think of me? You know, why am I reaching out? Yeah. No.
Yeah. If she second guessed herself because of comparison and she was in a place of isolation, I never would have received that phone call, and I never would have known that God had people protecting and praying over me on my worst days. And so when you open up and you resurrender and you tell God you're sorry, you don't want to have this comparative mindset. You know, we have lots of really, really good prayers in this study that kind of tie into this. And so I hope you get to see that. But really, it is as simple as a resurrendering prayer and just saying, like, God, I can't do this. I don't want to covet. I don't want to, violate your law. I don't want to sin. But I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be desolate and isolated. How can I do this, God? Here's what I have. Here's what I have. And he will take that and he will bring you into the community in which you're supposed to be in. He will put people around you that need you and you need. Yep. And that's really all there is.
You said it really well.
Is that resurrendering piece. And so, I mean, we just like, our heart is just for you to have that sense that you're connected to God and you're connected with others. So like Steph said, number one, when you feel isolated and trapped by comparison, it's to read your Bible, which is not my first inclination.
Correct.
It's not.
No.
I wish I could
solve
sit
this
here.
problem?
Yes, because I think when you're intelligent and I think when you have that kind of like control mentality.
I like to analyze things.
Yes.
And come up with a solution. And
I think when you have that, you by nature don't rely on God until you're at your very, very, very weakest limit. Well,
and I think too, how many times do you think, oh, this is just, a blip on the radar of God, and I'm not going to bother him with that. Somebody else has its, humble comparison. Somebody else has it so much worse. But the thing is God has all the people on this earth as his children, but he still knows and loves us as if we were his only.
Yeah.
And he wants to be part of those tiny decisions.
See, for me, I'm different. I don't, maybe I'm just like super self-absorbed. I do not at all worry that God is too busy
much
for
better.
me.
But when I was growing up, I was just like, oh, and I had also had that said to me as well.
Well, so. I think as grown-ups, you do that to kids. Like, you could have it so much worse. Not like in a threatening way, but like in an appreciate what you have kind of way. Sorry. I think if you appreciate, like a grown-up wants to appreciate what you have.
Right.
And so I think, though, that can be translated completely incorrectly And that's where the problem is. And so that isn't what I think of when I am disconnected from God. I don't think that he doesn't need to be bothered with my commentary. I don't. I try to actually just tell him every single little detail, whether I'm isolating or not, whether I'm reading my Bible or not. But that first step is definitely reconnecting with his word. And I'm not saying that every time you sit down and crack open a Bible, it's going to be some giant epiphany light bulb moment where you just are completely overwhelmed by the Spirit and you recognize
everything makes sense.
That's just not how it is. There are many times where I'm super overwhelmed and I crack my Bible open and I read.
I'm like, what did I?
And I read, and I'm like, well, this is pointless. And then I'm like, should I just call the Word of God pointless?
Yeah.
Super sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's not pointless. I think the biggest example, and then I'll wrap up, is when I was praying for a child. Yeah. And this is probably a piece of the story that most people don't know, but I was praying, and we were walking out the surrogacy situation, and we just wanted answers, is this surrogacy the route that we're supposed to take? And is it not? What are we doing? And so we really were just overwhelmingly trying to discern, is it surrogacy? Are we just aunts and uncles? What is it? And I was like, okay, I gotta be in the Word. I gotta be super spiritual, extra holy with a side of awesome, and I gotta be in the Word. And I just read and I read and I read. And everywhere I read, it felt pointless. Every single thing I read talked about, I would sit down and I'd be like, okay, Lord, I know you're here. I know you're going to open this book right to what I need to hear. I feel it. I trust you. What the heck? What the heck? But what I didn't recognize is that every single verse that God brought me to during this time frame over the course of months or more, it talked about your first fruits, your tenths, and tithing, and giving the Lord all these things. And I was like, what does tithing have to do with me getting a baby? Until I realized we weren't tithing 10%. And but to be candid, we had there was some extra issues that we didn't talk about, and God gave both of us a number separately, and it wasn't a lot, but we genuinely sought God's heart, what should we be doing right now? And it was a number that we felt God gave both of us, and it was still a stretch for us, but that's what we did. And then we got more comfortable, we got promotions, we paid off some stuff, and we still kept tithing just that small number. And so as I was reading this, I was like, tithing, 10%, tenths. What does this have to do with surrogacy or having a baby? And then I was like, oh, we've not updated. We've not sought God in this financial space yet. And so I was like, oh gosh, 10% is 2.5 times now what we're giving, because the number was a lot closer to 10% before we had other things come up, and now it was very far from 10%. And so we were in my head, I had not brought any of this to Todd, and I was like, I can't. That's
too much. Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a
how am I going to
make stretch?
Bills paid.
Correct. That's a big stretch. Yeah. We're talking 2.5 times of the tithing that we were doing, and so I was like, whew. Okay, God, I'm just going to take it to Todd. And so I took it to my husband and I said, hey, so I know it's tight and this is what's up, but I feel like God's telling us over and over and over again that we're supposed to be tithing the full 10% now. Things have changed. I paid off this one student loan and whatever. He goes, okay. I was like, but it's a lot. That's 2.5 times more, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, but I know how much we make, and are you okay? He's like, yeah, I've been feeling the same way. I've been feeling like we need to reevaluate, and so I'm really glad you said this. Okay, so next week comes in, our paychecks come in, and we put our 10% out, and just a couple of days later, I found out about my son.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's that act of obedience, and
Yeah.
you surrendered to what he was asking you to do.
But I didn't recognize.
Correct. I mean,
Because I was going in for a certain answer, and I didn't feel like I was getting it.
It wasn't the answer that you wanted.
Or that I thought I was looking for.
Right. Well, how many times do you read scripture and you're like, this makes no sense, and then 3 or 4 days later, it pops into your head, or something relevant, and you're like, oh.
So that's what it is. So that's when we're saying, like, get in your Bible, even whether it makes sense or not.
Right.
Like,
don't give up. I mean,
correct. Like, even if it's just the
and...
verse of the day on the Bible app, like something, just to pay attention to. That's where God can talk to you the best.
Yep.
And so if we're spending time talking to God, then we're not letting the words of the enemy silence us in any way.
Correct.
Yep. So that's really the moral of episode 7.
Yeah. So, if we didn't say it, I may have said it at the beginning.
You said it at the beginning.
Okay.
But that's
just
okay.
Make sure you check everything out in the description.
Yes.
Like, do the things.
Subscribe, share, comment, DM us.
Let us
don't
know.
Slide in the DMs,
right.
but
we
DM
don't,
us.
We don't do the sliding.
We ain't playing for the slide in the DMs.
If you're sliding in my DMs, I'm deleting and blocking you. I'm just saying. And I it's weird how many times you have to do that on social media these days.
It's sad.
But yeah, if there's something that we have said that resonates with you, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, we'd love to know.
And just keep walking with God, and if you feel far away, just get in his word, because his word never fails.
Never.
And everything that's in there is God breathed.
Absolutely.
And
even all the crazy names in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I can't pronounce them, so I just make up gibberish in my head.
I have my Bible app read me the ones.
Yeah. Oh.
The names. Super smart, y'all.
Yeah, I didn't know until about 2 years ago that
it reads it.
Listen.
So, like, my Bible app, I'll literally, like, if I'm reading the Bible, like, my Tuesday group, we just wrapped up, but we just read Ezra, and there's a lot of names. Mm-hmm. And so, we were like, we're just trying, and I'm like, wait a second. And so I, like, and it's like, Elohim, Jeshua. It's like, they do it so good. I'm like, all right, that's my new role. Yep.
I'm do that.
Have the Bible app read the names, because it's confusing. But they're also important.
Yes.
The names are there for a reason, so they need to be there.
Every person has a role in the kingdom.
We are really running late, so we're going to let you guys go.
Yeah. We'll talk about boundaries next time.
Yes, boundaries will be episode 8 next week. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to discussing boundaries next.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Have a great week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.